So, first things first. Sig.
Are we recording now?
Yes, we're recording. So I'm going to address you as Sig, as that is your stage name / nickname / that's stuck forever, has it? Or
just, I just think it's a nickname. So it's very interesting. I don't like my name in English, which is interesting. It just sounds better in most other countries, like in French, Spanish, and Italian particularly. And when I was in high school, I was Siggy, and I never liked Siggy. And then when I moved to New York full time, it just got shortened to Sig. But if people have known me a very, very long time, or the Brits, for whatever reason, nicknames don't seem to fly there, I pretty much only go by Sig, except if you've known me like since I was a kid.
Okay, so moving forward, I will just use Sig.
Just Sig.
Just Sig. So
yeah.
In your book or in your biography and everything, it says that your passion for cigars has been for over 35 years. So what initially...
Is this the interview?
Yes.
Don't you want to do a introduction and...
Yeah. So, well, it was going to be part of the introduction.
Oh!
But that's fine. Would you prefer to announce yourself and say who you are first?
Oh, God, no.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages. No, I do not want to do that whatsoever.
Fine. Okay, fine.
But we'll start. Now I'm in the zone. I'm in the zone. We can use that.
Okay.
I don't know. Or not.
Yeah,
I don't, but I'm in the zone.
Well, okay. So, Sig.
Yes, Callie.
What initially drew you to the world of cigars, and how has your appreciation evolved over the time you've been in and around the cigar industry?
That's a good question, to be honest with you. Well, a couple of things, I suppose. As I mentioned earlier in our pre-interview, I was kidnapped by gypsies and forced to work in the cigar industry at a very young age. That is not true. My father, I think like a lot of people, my interest in cigars started because my father was an occasional cigar smoker. He often had convertibles or cabriolets when I was growing up. And, he'd drop the top and he'd light up a cigar and tootle around. I grew up in Los Angeles, so the weather was always nice. Got a little sunshine, had a cigar. And I think that was a really, really fond childhood memory. So I think that was part of it. And then when I was in graduate school, I needed to get a job, which really was very disheartening, quite honestly. And through a couple of strokes of luck and series of events, I wound up becoming the general manager of the Davidoff of Geneva store on Rodeo Drive at the ripe old age of 22. So I just started young, and I kind of fell into a huge position very early, and that kind of grew. One of my mentors and really just one of the loveliest human beings in the world is Benji Menendez, who worked for, whose family, obviously, his father created Monte Cristo. But Benji always said, when you stop learning, then, and you stop being inquisitive about learning, it's kind of all over. And so you asked me, what keeps me going? What do I learn? Every day I learn something new. Every day I talk to somebody and I garner some sort of insight that I didn't have. So it has been a lifelong, not just love affair, but kind of tutorial, I guess, for lack of a better word.
So with starting in the cigar industry via work, and obviously your dad had a passion for cigars, what then pushed you to go into sort of the journalism of cigars, to write books? Like, where's the link there?
Sure, absolutely. So while I was working at Davidoff, Cigar Aficionado came out. At the time, Cigar Aficionado was the only, what we would call in the United States, a glossy, so a kind of a Condé Nast style magazine that covered cigars. And my father loved it. And I only liked it. And I liked it and nothing more, because it really didn't speak to my generation. It just was kind of, also alluding to our pre-interview, it was very posh. It was about the best school to get your butler, the best butler school, where to rent your next jet, where to charter your next yacht. And I was 22 years old. So I was not having a butler and I was not chartering a yacht, although that would have been nice. And so I started writing the business plan for Smoke Magazine, and Smoke Magazine became the second glossy cigar periodical out there.
Wow. Yeah.
Period.
I mean,
and I created that. I wrote the business plan for it. I created it. I raised the money for it. And then we launched it. And it was a rip-roaring success. And I was took a lot of work, but I was very grateful for it. So that was it. So it was almost an instantaneous segue. I knew I love cigars, and I guess I should explain. I had been on my junior high school, my high school, and my university newspaper. So I always knew I wanted to write.
Yeah.
I was going to grad school. I guess I left that whole part out. I was going to graduate school. I was going to grad school for screenwriting. I thought I was in Los Angeles, and like everybody else, I didn't want to be an actor. I didn't want to be a director. I wanted to be a screenwriter. And then this kind of came along, and it's funny just how people's brains work, and you connect the dots, and you're like, I love cigars, and there's only one cigar magazine, really real cigar magazine, and it doesn't speak to a lot of the people that were coming into the shop, who were guys in their 20s and their 30s, and this was during the cigar boom of the 90s, and I knew there was room in the marketplace for, quote, at least one more magazine. Now, subsequently, there's online magazines, and there's print magazines, and there's books and all sorts of stuff. And with the cigar boom, you really had an explosion of cigar media as an umbrella, a niche, but an umbrella category. And so that's kind of how it all came to be.
So as of date, how many books have you written yourself? So obviously you've been part of like the magazine and things like that. How many books have you got under your hat?
Both magazines and books, or just books?
Just books.
Well, I've written at this juncture 22 books.
Wow.
Cigars, a biography. I'm very lonely, Callie. I just sit at home, chained to my desk right away. 22 books, 5 kind of. This is the 5th book. Cigars, a biography is the 5th book. I may be working on a 6th. I said there wouldn't be, and I wouldn't do it, but maybe I'm noodling with it. So there you go. But
okay.
Cigars, a biography is my 5th published book on cigars.
And Cigars, a biography, that is described as your most personal work to date. But what inspired you to make that book based on, you've written other cigar publication things before. So
sure.
What made you sit down and think, I'm going to write this time?
Cigars biography came about in a very specific way. It wasn't, I just woke up one day and decided this was something that I was going to do. And it's a very simple story, but it's not a particularly short one. It's not overly long either. When I wrote my first book, Playboy Book of Cigars, a lot of people were involved in it. Hugh Hefner was still alive and actually edited the book, which was an amazing experience. There were editors within the Playboy organization. Altadas USA was tangentially involved in the project. And I just felt like a lot of people were telling me what to do, which was fine. And it was a successful book, and I was very happy with it. But it just kept making me wonder, like, what would happen if I did like a hands-off book. Subsequently, I did the Impossible Collection of Cigars, which was an amazing experience. But again, Prosper Azzolin, who's the co-founder of Azzolin Publishing, who's a cigar guy, he was deeply involved in the book as well, and had comments and questions, and kind of steered that ship a little bit. Then when I did the 2 books for Arturo Fuente, you had Carlito and Cynthia Fuente, who had their takes. You had Ciro Casella, who was really the one who greenlit the project, and who's the CEO of Tabacalera Fuente. And on and on and on. And once again, we did those books with Azzolin. So the Azzolin team had it. So getting to where we are now, there were 2 things. I always wanted to do a sequel to the Playboy Book of Cigars. I have the rights to that book. However, Playboy as a company has been sold several times over since Hugh Hefner's passing, and that's unfortunate. And I just found it a very difficult landscape to navigate, quite honestly. And more importantly, once again, I just wanted a book where nobody was going to really, it was just, it's personal because it's the purest extension or expression of where I'm at with cigars. And it's a collaboration with Ian Spanier, my photographer who came on, not my photographer, the photographer for this publication. And Ian and I had done 4 books, or I guess 3 books prior, 4 books in total. And I just really wanted to do another book with Ian. And so that kind of culminated into us starting in earnest Cigars, a biography. And by the way, I like to make this point. It's not Cigars, Aaron Sigmund's autobiography. This is a biography of cigars.
Of cigars,
so
yeah.
There you go.
I've had a look at some of Ian's work and it's incredible. So that actually led me on to the next question. So your partnership with Ian.
Cat.
Yeah, like how has your partnership with Ian sort of influenced the visual storytelling of your book? Like, who's behind the photos? Are you both, working together to say, it'd be great to have photos of this, this, and this, or does he take the lead and that inspires you to talk about certain things? How do you work together with things like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, it's a couple different ways. Ian and I, so I did a second cigar magazine. It was very short-lived because of the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. And it was called the Cigar Report, but it had a huge circulation for very short lifespan. It had a large publication, mostly because it piggybacked on some other publications with the publisher that I was working with at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Ian was the head photographer for that magazine. And that's how we got started. And we went from literally that, not just magazine, but that whole company folding during the financial crisis to working on the Playboy Book of Cigars together. I think like any great partnership, any great collaboration, we kind of riff and play off each other's strengths. And, I really opened the world of cigars to Ian. He had never really smoked a lot of cigars, and he had never traveled to Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, Honduras, Mexico, Cuba, Ybor City. I mean, we've traveled now all over the Caribbean basin covering cigars and gone to every major country except, I guess we've never been to Ecuador together because it's just
that's the next book.
It's farms. That's the next book. We'll see. But I think Ian comes at, and I don't want to speak for him, but I will since he's not here to a degree, and I know this for sure. What Ian always tries to address when we're in a factory, in a field, traveling somewhere is he knows that 85, 90, 95% of the people who enjoy cigars will never get to visit these destinations. They just won't. And he's kind of this voyeur. He wants to take people on this journey with his images and really create an intimate portrait of what the cigar life, when it comes to the farming aspect and the manufacturing aspect, really, really is, and have people understand the quote unquote art of the cigar and what it takes to produce a cigar. And I think all those things are wrapped into his work, which, as you said, is amazing and multiple award winning. So he's a talented guy and he has a real vision. I don't think I consider Ian's images when I'm writing. I can't imagine I would, except for the photos he takes of me, of course. But I don't think so. And nor do I think he really thinks of what I'm writing. I mean, other than the countries that we want to cover or the regions, like in the new book, we spent almost an entire week in Windsor, Connecticut, where broadleaf and other leaf are grown. But we went during the harvest. And even though he grew up in New York, he'd never really spent a lot of time in that part of New England, seeing the barns that are there and seeing the harvest. And it's, you just think of it always as very tropical and very lush and all those type of things. But, here we are 2.5, not quite 3 hours outside of New York City, and we're on a tobacco farm, and a large one. And it's fantastic.
It's mad. Yeah. Yeah. You were right in what you were saying about how people haven't visited some of the countries. So I myself, I haven't visited any tobacco farms or factories at this point. But what's, for me, I've seen loads and loads of photos of fields and factories and things like that we get sent, and they're great imagery. But there's something about Ian's that, I looked at it and thought, like, wow, there's a depth to his photography, and there's a real rawness. You almost feel there. And, I'm a bit of a photography and a nerd like that anyway. I'm a creative, like, I like things like photography and videography, but there's something about them photos that I think, it's great that you have him working with you, because it just helps tell the story and it helps put people there visually. So
I think there are two things. One is, in many ways, Ian is a portrait photographer. I mean, that's his primary vocation. That's what he does. He's usually shooting celebrities or sports figures and whatnot. But I think that makes him very, very unique within this. I think what also makes him unique is we've now been shooting photos together since 2007. So he has an unrivaled archive. So some of the photos in the book are from 07, 08, all the way to, I think, the very last photo we specifically shot for the book was a portrait of Rocky Patel, and that would have been in June 23, 24, something. Well, I guess it was 24. So, I mean, when you look at that wide expanse, it's not quite 20 years, but to have that sort of archive, it makes Ian de facto a documentarian, whether we set out to have his archive be that or not. It truly is an unrivaled archive. And I'm not saying photographers that cover the cigar industry are not professional, but here is a different caliber of photographer who has gone Miami, Ybor City, Mexico, Nicaragua, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, many, many times, Cuba, a number of times, gone up to Windsor, Connecticut. I mean, that alone has really, really aided in the fact that, sorry, I got some ash on me, really, really aided, in this project specifically, because we traveled to a bunch of places specifically just for this book. And then all the past trips and travels. And it's just, I think that is what makes his portfolio or his body of cigar work completely unique. And I've said, and maybe you'll get to it, maybe you won't, but I've said multiple times, this book, Cigars, a Biography, is really 3 books in one. The first third of the book is a history book, and that's what it is. There's no choice about it. It's not the sexy part of the book. It's not the it is, if you want a deep dive read, that's what it is. The middle third of the book it could be a standalone book on itself. It's an entire portfolio of Ian's work mixed with some archival deep vintage photos, a couple of essays, but for the most part, it is just straight up Ian's work. And then the back of the book is all the service-oriented stuff and brands and where to smoke and things to do and blah, blah, blah. So it's very, very distinct. And Ian's section very much stands on its own, with or without what bookends it on either side.
Wow. So that does lead me again to my next question. This is working quite well. That you've mentioned that you and Ian have traveled a lot of places, but throughout your career, you've been to numerous cigar manufacturers, tobacco fields. Are there any particular lessons from these people that stand out in the book? Like, are there people that you mention in particular? Like, what have you taken from these trips that you've then put into your book?
Sure. Well, I don't like the word lucky, but I've been very, very fortunate to have had unrivaled access to the greatest cigar makers of the 20th and 21st century. I don't know how you could distill it down any more than that. And many of the things that I learned from them are reflected in the book. Even though I said it was not about me, and it's not, there is a real autobiographical element to the book and the lessons that I learned and the things that I took away. For example, I've known Hanky Kellner since 1992, actually, I guess 92, when he first came to Los Angeles to visit the Beverly Hills Davidoff store. Well, the Dominican Davidoffs only started in 91. So, and I'm having dinner with him next month, or yeah, I guess next month. So how do you top that? I mean, I've known him the entire time, sans a couple of months that that he was making Davidoff cigars and now working with his sons on other projects. I mean, that's extraordinary within the world of cigars. And it's never lost on me. I'm very grateful, and I know I'm very fortunate to have had that. You have to remember, when I came into the cigar business, there weren't a lot of 20-something-year-olds jumping into the cigar trade. It wasn't sexy. It was a business on decline. I started in technically December 91, but we'll call it 92. The cigar boom, as people think about it, really doesn't come in full force till 93, 94 as a cultural zeitgeist. I'm not talking about numbers going up as far as sales go, but as a cultural phenomenon, 93, 4, but definitely 95, 96, 97, really through 98. And so I knew all these guys. I mean, and it's not just Henke, it's Benji, it's Carlos Carlito Fuente Jr., and, you know, RIP his father, who I didn't know nearly as well, but, you know, they were around. I mean, I've known Lito Gomez since he and Inez started La Flor Dominicana. That's nothing short of remarkable. Not because I did anything. I just was in the right place at the right time. And so I think all those things are reflected in the book. Wasn't a very succinct answer, but
no,
we got there eventually.
So with your book now being soon to be available in the UK, what do you hope that the UK readers, so both aficionados and newcomers, will take away from reading your book? So obviously some people will pick up your book and take a look at it as someone that doesn't smoke cigars yet, or is perhaps looking to get into the world of cigars. What do you hope that they take from it?
So I keep on saying those are good questions, but it really just means that I get apparently a lot of bad questions in the course of my interviews.
That's fine.
Take it. I don't throw out a lot of compliments all the time. Well, I will say this. I don't know that this is necessarily per se a cigar 101 book like Richard Carlton Hacker's or Nicholas Falks's books, in that this is how you smoke a cigar. There's a whole section about aging cigars, but by the time you're aging cigars, you're kind of already, if not collecting, you at least have a few boxes in your humidor. I guess I can just go through the book again, in that there's a history chapter, but it is a deep, deep dive. This book is 107,000 words. That's longer than most novels. Wow. The history chapter alone, I believe, I've forgotten, but it's about 55,000 words. Most books on cigars aren't even that long. And that's just that section. So if you're a neophyte, if you're a newbie to cigars, and this is really what you want to do, this is a very comprehensive, and I like to think lighter. It's not written with an academic tone, but this is a deep dive into cigars. And if you want to know everything, but it's also from a very American angle. I talk a lot about Tampa and Ybor City. I talk a fair amount of Key West. I talk about how tobacco was exported from originally Cuba and hand rolled in the United States. And there were all sorts of reasons for that. But so I think there's something in there for everybody. And then there's Ian's section, and that's really, it's universal, right? It's visual, it's beautiful. You know, there are some light essays there. That's where I do some of my more personal autobiographical essays, and just talk about certain memories from certain countries, and that was really fun to do. The back third of the book is really what somebody who was just getting into cigars would like. We talk about different cigar brands. We talk about different personalities within the cigar trade. We talk about lounges and cigar bars and cigar shops, merchants all over the world, and where they can go and purchase cigars, and just the overall lifestyle aspects of it. So, you know, I think you can take away from the book, whether you're in the UK or Australia or the US or Canada. We can't forget Canada.
Don't forget Canada.
Don't forget Canada. Oh, Canada. I think you'll take away from the book exactly what you want to take away from the book. And that's not rhetorical. I mean, I really mean, I tried to think about all those things. I also, for an older guy, I have a fair Instagram following, and I get a lot of questions all the time DM to me. And I tried to address the most regular questions in the back third of the book. Like, I get all sorts of questions. And I tried to really address those in that back third, which we would call the service part of the book.
So now, once your book is out, when you get a question that you think, I've answered that, you can just send them a link to the book. Hey.
That's literally my dream. It's like, all I want to do is say, buy the book, buy the book.
Please, just buy the book. Everything's in there. All you need to know.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know if everything's in there, but most everything's in there. But
most
yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. So, wow. Yeah,
okay,
it's fun.
Reflecting, I know we joked at the start when you said, wow, we've cut 30 years of your timeline, but reflecting on your journey to where you are now, obviously cigars have been a big influence in your life because it's become part of your career, if not most of your career. But how has your relationship with cigars influenced your personal and your professional life? So
is this a sexual question? Is this like a Clinton reference?
No.
Well, thank God.
I'm too
but you
young
said
for
my
that.
personal, and I'm like, if it's personal, it's pretty personal, Callie. We don't know each other that well. Well, Zeno Davidoff very famously said, I owe cigars everything in my life. And even though I've worked very closely in watches and cognac and other categories, it would not be a far stretch to say that cigars have been instrumental in my entire professional journey. And even the people I met, I mean, this isn't my favorite thing about the indirect nature of cigars, or just how kind of life works. Someone will say, do you know so-and-so? And I'm like, yes, because they're a cigar smoker, or I know this person because so in other words, it was only because I was personally a cigar smoker, forgetting the professional aspects of it, that I've gotten to meet all these people and get to know all these people. And likelihood of me encountering some of them wouldn't have happened except for the fact that we were both, fond of cigars.
Yeah, I think you get that a lot over here as well with the cigar events and things that we have in the UK. There's actual, groups and communities where people that don't work within the industry, such as myself, but they literally go to enjoy the cigar. They've made so many friendships and links, and they end up being business links or really close friendships, and it sort of brings everyone together, which is the really nice shiny part of our industry.
Absolutely. The camaraderie that goes with cigars is unparalleled. Yeah. And even when you compare it to wine or kind of other similar interests, there's nothing like it. I mean, people talk about 6 degrees of separation, but if you're a cigar smoker, it's half that. You're never more than 1 or 2 calls away from anyone who's a true cigar enthusiast. And that's one of the things I truly am very passionate about and love about this industry. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite cigar or memorable cigar smoking experience that you can share with the people so we can get to know you a bit more? On your trips, is there anything extraordinary that's happened? I mean, most trips to cigar related places are extraordinary, to be fair, but something that's really, really stuck with you that has shaped you.
Well, I guess there are 2 that stand out to me. The first time that you get to smoke an Opus X at Chateau de la Fuente with Carlito is pretty mind-blowing. I mean, it was created there. There was nothing there. First Poro in the Dominican Republic. That was very, very special for me. I'm sure Carlito did think twice about it, but it was a thing for me. I've told this story before in other interviews, but it remains true. In the early days, before there was even a Habanos festival, they were doing these kind of events and galas. And there was the 150th anniversary of the Partagas, and then there was the 30th anniversary sequentially of Cohiba. And relations between the U.S. and Cohiba at that particular moment were particularly frosty, as they are once again. It waxes and it wanes. And so I was one of a handful of Americans that happened to be at the 30th anniversary Cohiba event, gala dinner. And we're smoking our Cohibas. and out walks Fidel Castro. And it wasn't a very big crowd. There were maybe, I don't know, 500-700 of us. It wasn't a particularly large gathering for a gala. And Fidel walks out on the stage and starts speaking extemporaneously for, I don't know, an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half, no teleprompter, no notes, no speech, nothing. And for an American to be that close to Fidel Castro, good, better, and different, as you might see his politics, I mean, an icon of, the second half of the 20th century, as far as politics goes, it's not even extraordinary. It was next level. And especially for an American, I mean, there were Brits there and there were all sorts of people there, but to be one of the handful of Americans there was just kind of a next level thing. I couldn't imagine something topping that, not because I had great reverence for Fidel Castro, but just because
the whole situation.
You're in Havana, you're in Cuba, you're in Havana, you're a couple feet away from Fidel Castro, who's just talking to the group like we're old pals. And it was just an insane experience. And I think that is the one, those are the two answers I give all the time, because yes, there are very personal ones, and what I smoked on my wedding, or when I caught my first marlin and whatnot, but those kind of pale in comparison to the aforementioned two. So I think those would be the two that I always go back to and say, those were remarkable experiences for sure.
Incredible. That's incredible. So this is an off the cuff question. Can the UK be prepared to see you at some point? Perhaps do some book signings, meet you. We're all friendly over here to want to chat and ask you 101 questions where you can tell them to go and buy the book. But hopefully they'll have bought the book already.
That's true. So it's no secret that I've spent a lot of time in the UK. I'm a big fan of it. I did an exchange program at Cambridge at Selwyn. I read there for a while, and that was great. So yes, it's a matter of my schedule, but sooner than later, somewhere in the next, 4 or 5 months, I will be in the UK, and I will do whatever, I guess, Tour Imports tells me to do when it comes to promote the book. But yeah, absolutely. We will all be there and enjoy every moment of it. I've never not enjoyed my time in the UK. So yeah.
Right. So your recent book, apart from Ian, is there anyone else that you worked with to create that, or was it just yourself?
Yeah, no. These books, these books are remarkably collaborative. I don't think people understand this sort of book, as opposed to a novel, is a great collaborative art form. So it's not just Ian and I. There's photo editors and there's copy editors. There's Brian Dawson, who's my longtime line editor. And then there's Liliana Gia, who's actually a business partner in Mad Dash Press. She's our creative director, and she designs not all, but most of the books that we do. And Lil and I have worked together forever. I don't know, almost 20 years. And she's a different counterweight to Ian and I. So when Ian and I are at an impasse, Lil will just come in like a bulldozer and just say, "This is the way it is, and we're moving on." She says, "I don't give a fuck" a lot. She does care, but she doesn't care about that one particular thing. Yeah. And she just kind of plows on. So she's like my right arm when it comes down to it with the publishing company in general. But she designed this book, and I think she did an incredible job. It flows exactly. It's very, very rare. Doesn't matter whether you're making a cigar or anything else, or a book in this case, where the vision that you have mentally on day one is ostensibly or essentially what you achieve in the very end. Mm-hmm. And Lil and I brainstormed a whole bunch before we started, and the book is exactly the way we envisioned it, with those 3 distinct sections. So I think that's a testament to, in great part, her patience and her fortitude of dealing with me and Ian to a degree, but certainly again, just having this remarkable collaborative vision. And, it's very much like TV or magazine or other things where I don't think people really realize how many people it takes to create a book like this. I'm not even talking about production and the printer that we used and all those type of folks. Along the lines of this being a collaboration, I really want to give a shout out to Tom Chamberlain of The Rake, who's obviously UK based and phenomenal magazine, and one that I've been proud to have had one photo in. Once you, it's a lot of pressure once you have your photo in The Rake in a suit, because then everything else is judged by that. But Tom was very, very kind and lent his written voice to writing the foreword to this book. So yet another layer of collaboration, and Tom was very, very kind. So there's a little footprint. Actually, there are a couple of essays by a couple of Brits in the book, and Tom's is actually the very first thing people read. So there you go. And that was very kind of him. Yeah, that was nice.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Your enthusiasm is overwhelming. Obviously, you're excited about that forward.
I'm not going to put me in that bit. But while I go back into stage mode, next question.
Yeah.
I'm aware that this book has a limited release, so there's 2,500 being printed, and they're already being pre-sold all around the world. So the UK have an allocation. You mentioned loads of different places earlier that it's going to be sold in. So realistically, if people are going to get their hands on the book, they need to be quick about it, we're saying, yeah?
They are. Between pre-sales and wholesales, over 2,000 copies of the 2,500 are already spoken to. Now, obviously, that's on a wholesale side in the UK, and so your allocation is ready for, exactly. But they're gone-ish, and certainly by Christmas time this year, I would imagine they'll all be gone. And when I say there are 2,500 copies of this book, and I will not redo what we call the deluxe edition or the deluxe limited edition of this book, that is it. It was a complicated book. We didn't get into all the geeky printing stuff because I know your audience doesn't really care. They care about cigars, and they shouldn't really care about it. The production of this book has been enormously complicated. We used a lot of different paper stocks, very elaborate slipcase, and that it was just very labor intensive. And I just couldn't ever foresee in any circumstance printing more than those 2,500 copies. And actually in the front page on the inside part of the book, it very specifically states that there are only 2,500 copies of the book and there will be no more. And I very much stand by that. I think, talking about Liliana, I think if I told her we were even printing like a couple hundred more copies, she would actually come over to my house and kill me. So and I'm not joking. I think she is well done with this project. It's just been a very incredibly satisfying, but it was a complicated project. And in part because Ian's on the West Coast, we're on the East Coast of the United States, and et cetera. But 2,500 copies, that's it. Absolutely no more than that.
Well, you know what they say, teamwork makes the dream work. And
that's
there is always
a
great team behind a great face.
There you go. I don't know if it's a great face, but it's the only one I got for right now.
Well, so thank you so much for catching up with me today.
It's been a pleasure.
Well, I look forward to getting the book myself, because I will read it, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you in the UK
I appreciate that.
This year. So yeah, thanks for sitting down, and let's launch
sooner than later. Absolutely. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.